Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 383 for Monday, January 5th, 2026. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixelriffs, and joining me in from the cold is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello. Happy New Year to all the new listeners and all the old listeners and all the longtime listeners. We have a lot in store coming up this episode, but if you want to hear more, you can listen to the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the podcast. We were talking about how the holidays went, how Canada is very cold right now, and how the UK is following suit. And everybody is indoors doing indoor things like tabletop gaming and talking about the latest things we've been streaming on various services and looking forward to films and shows coming up in the new year. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the Render Distance by going to patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Supporting at any level gets you access to that, which is something we do every single week. There's always extra content. Once a month, we do the Minecraft Hangout, which is going to be a larger one in January, coming up on probably Saturday the 31st. And that is going to cover what our community has been up to in Minecraft, not only for January, but probably for December as well, because we didn't have a holiday Minecraft Hangout because, of course, everybody's busy over the holidays. And then following that, we also have a quarterly Hangout coming up. Usually the first week in February is when we will recover Q4 of 2025, but then also a look back at 2025 as a year. And that's how the podcast is doing. Download numbers, Spotify reviews, that kind of thing. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, check out patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
Yes, one of my New Year's resolutions is to support more creators in what they do. So if you want to join me in that, yes, head over to the Patreon. This week, Mojang seem to be still on their holiday break, or at least the team is probably getting back into the office, but we haven't heard anything on a development front. So we're going to be looking ahead to what our personal Minecraft projects this year might bring. And I know, Joel, in your case, you haven't really slowed down all that much over the Christmas and holiday breaks. So let us know what you've been up to on the Citadel this week.
So the command center is still in the process of being completed. I think it's going to be a while. I am surprised at how long this is taking. Sharing a bunch of screenshots for our live listeners. I'll have a selection of these on our show notes at thespawnchunks.com as well. I'm really happy with the way things are going, with the exception of how slow it's going. I've had to make some design decisions, and with something this big, when you know how many blocks have to be placed, you kind of want to get it right so you don't have to repeat things or rip things down. Even though most of the blocks that I've chosen, luckily, are also instant mined with a beacon. And we've got beacons everywhere. So terracotta, polished diorite, polished andesite, a lot of tuff as well, stone, and quartz is what I decided to use on the floor. So if I decide to rip something up, it's fine. It's not going to take that long, which is good. But some of the materials I've chosen, like quartz, are not the easiest to come by. So I've been borrowing from other server mates. I have been taking my shulker box of quartz ore that I was so proud that I had, and it's down to like 4 stacks now, because you really don't get much when you're using quartz blocks. And I've even used slabs in some cases to kind of spread the low amount of blocks I have over a large area. So the first thing I did was, after finishing off the middle section, I should say finishing off, roughing in the middle section as an octagon, I started working on the entrances to the bay doors, hiding lights, using like reverse stairs to have light peek out from behind blocks. As I've mentioned before, there's a lot of depth in these walls. I've got lots of room to create like lights behind walls and put lights behind slab holes in stone and all that kind of stuff. So I've used a lot of end rods, and I've used a lot of open kind of like accent lighting and floor lighting, where I've got recessed lighting with frog lights under glass that then shine up the walls to kind of give that up lighting effect, which makes everything look futuristic no matter what you're doing. So that was the bulk of the initial part of the Christmas vacation. And then I started thinking more practically, and rather than continuing with the outside, I thought I would go up to the second floor inside, because where the elevators are going to go affects how I'm going to need to design the outside, because I have to hide them, and they're corner walls, or they're angled walls, 45 degrees. So the elevators are deep because you have to have the 2 honey blocks, the water column behind them, 2 other columns to hold the water column in place. So all of a sudden you're 3 or 4 blocks deep on an angle, which makes the walls quite thick. So I haven't yet decided how I'm going to decorate the outside, but it's more of a function over fashion at this point. And I needed to make sure that the inside looked and felt good before I did the outside. And that's a lesson I learned from Westhill. Whether it was the keep in Westhill, which was a major part of it, but also some of the other builds I did where it was just like you'd think this is how big you want it to be. But then when you start to decorate the inside, you're like, well, wait a minute. I don't want this inside to be like a 2x3 area. I want the inside to be a bit larger so I can put like a stove and a table and that kind of thing inside. So I started to think about the process. And so when I build something now, I rough out the outside, I get it to where I want it, roughly where I want it to look. And then before I really finalize things, I get inside and I start to figure out like how is this going to feel to move around in. And late game, it's very easy to just fly around with Elytra in your build, but I like to put in practical things. In Westhill, it was like, where do the staircases go? How do you get up to the ramparts? How do you get up to the next floor? And in this, it's thankfully it's a lot easier. It's elevators, so it's just a straight line up, but you still have to have room for them. They have to make sense. And we're kind of leaning into the Minecraft nature of things. I decided early on, rather than trying to force Minecraft to look like some sci-fi stuff that I know and references that I like, I'm trying to lean into the blockiness of Minecraft and make Minecraft sci-fi. So certainly taking inspiration and shape ideas from reference, but really leaning into the fact that the elevator is going to have like a square cap on it because it's Minecraft and that's easy to do, and leaning into end rods and different things like that. And the fact that Minecraft has no gravity on a lot of blocks. So things like a force field railing. What does that look like? I tried a couple of ideas and everything felt too practical. And then this kind of idea with end rods with glass panes floating between them just kind of struck me. I thought I'd give it a go, and actually it looks pretty cool. So those are the kind of things that I've been leaning into. I'm really happy with the way things are going. It's looking nicer the more lights that I add and the more color that I add. It's so exciting because the honey blocks, of course, are bright yellow. And so I've used yellow terracotta to completely construct the elevators and encase them. So everything kind of has this yellow glow. There's frog lights behind the elevator, every other block. There's glass panes in front of it. And playing with shaders now with a new video card, like it really does help everything look very sci-fi-esque. So I'm quite happy with the way things are coming together.
Yeah, I think this is so stylish looking, and I think it's really cool.
Thanks,
that
man.
along with the orange, yellow accents, you've also got purple in there, and we sort of talked about that briefly before when you sort of initially started the central octagon in the middle. But I do think that's a really interesting choice compared to a lot of other sci-fi build palettes that will use like orange and blue as like complementary colors, or they'll throw other bits and pieces in there, but you see purple less frequently, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe purple feels like more of like a fantasy color. It's usually like the royalty or the sort of
I can see that.
Priesthood or whatever in whatever fantasy world. So I think it's neat to have that as part of the sci-fi palette. It really kind of sets this apart as something interesting. And it's funny, when you had started talking about needing bubble column elevators and it just being the logical choice for something this size, but also the level of technology you're trying to portray here, I didn't at first think of hiding them behind honey blocks. And so I thought, well, you're going to have a water texture and see the bubbles and kind of have to sort of hand wave that as part of like a sci-fi elevator thing. But I think the fact that you can do that trick where, because the honey blocks are slightly different size hitboxes than they render as, you can kind of step into the honey block and get shot upwards. It makes them look a little bit more like they fit the sci-fi world of this than just having an exposed bubble column out there. So I think that's a really, really smart choice.
Thanks. We actually do have that hand waving thing happening in Southport, the modern city. We just decided that similar to like the Lego movie, kind of there'd be a level of like anything goes kind of happening in the city build. And so I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to do something different here. And I might do elevator like bubble columns in another building, but in this building I wanted to feel pretty clean. So that it was a combination of like the color and the angle, because I'm now doing more elevators on the second floor, because as I've started to kind of like rough in some ideas for bulkheads and how I'm going to make the second floor, I've decided to hide the elevators for the trip from the second floor to the third floor inside the bulkheads of the main entrances to these big wings. And it's a honey block elevator again, but it's not at an angle. It's square. And you need 2 bubble columns, right, to make it symmetrical, because they have to be in the corners. You can't just walk up to a flat honey block, nothing happens. You have to be in the corner, either left or right. So to make it something where I don't have to think about which corner I'm going to. You just have to go to either corner, and it'll just take you to the next floor. So designing that has been a challenge as well. But it also creates like an opportunity to learn and have these in your repertoire. And I think like down the line, as you're building other things in Minecraft, like just having these for, like an average redstone build that you just want to have something like this in, it's really nice to know how to build one quite easily now. Because that's one thing that I forgot about symmetrical builds, is that you take all this time to figure out a design, and you do have the opportunity to iterate. When I'm doing 4 elevators, I built them all just slightly differently as I constructed them, and I went back with the one that I liked and then changed the other ones to match. But when you're doing that, if it's something more simple like the lighting or the stuff over the top of the doors, on a build this scale, you're like, cool, that looks great. Crap, I've got to do this 3 more times around around everything to mirror it. So I think one of the things I'm going to try as I get into the top levels is that the entrances are all going to match, because you're going to be able to see those across the mezzanine. But inside, I think I'm going to like they're going to be different colors inside. I think one room might be mostly purple, one room might be mostly white. Like I'm going to try to vary it up, because those rooms are going to have different functions, and I don't know what those are yet. And it's something that I'm looking forward to sorting out over time. I don't have to make those decisions now, but I do definitely want to branch out and make sure that everything is not like exactly the same once you get past the doors. So it should be fun. Like right now, I've got I want to say temporary. I think it's going to stay there. If it stays there, I'm going to design it to either, if it's something we're going to see, I'll change it to look nicer. But I put in a villager breeder. Just because with the amount of quartz that I think I'm going to need, I'm going to go with masons. I think I'm going to try to start trading for blocks with masons, which also means I'm going to need like a carrot farm or other things to try to trade with villagers. So one of these wings is going to be a pretty big villager trading hall.
I recommend trading iron to villagers. Like that's the thing that I've defaulted to in my world, just because you set up a simple iron farm, especially now you can chunk load things wherever. You could probably set one up on the Mushroom Island pretty easily and just have it run in the background. And then if you zombify and cure villagers, you have a fairly easy like single iron ingot to single emerald trade. But then if you don't zombify them, it's still only 4-1, which is not that bad compared to some of the other trades that are out there. Even pumpkins and melons, I think, is like 8 or 6 usually. So I find that crop farms tend to pale in comparison to other resources that are much more easily farmed sort of remotely in the background. And so I trip over to my iron farm every so often to grab more stuff, because I've been using villagers as XP to refresh my pickaxes whenever I'm doing these large beacon mining projects, which have continued on the survival guide in the background.
Nice.
I haven't made much progress in other areas though, so I really need to work on some stuff. I need to go looking for deliberately for some of the stuff from Mounts of Mayhem, I think. But the beacon mine, in the meantime, is slowly working its way towards the 3rd patch of it being done, and that's the point at which I really have to consider: am I using these zombie spawners as a drowned farm, or am I going to do something else with that space, actually make that part of the copper aging setup and destroy the spawners, much to the chagrin of everyone who feels like spawners need to be preserved. But over the holidays, I've dipped into Enshrouded a lot more, both on Twitch with a few friends, including you. We managed to get a stream of it in together. I believe that's up on your VODs channel.
It is. Yeah, it's on Joel Duggan VODs on YouTube. It's up there.
Yeah, definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested in the game. It's still in early access, but is going from strength to strength in terms of the content that they're adding. But I've been playing a little more off-camera as well, just for a fresh perspective on building in games. And I like to do these detours into other games, both for a look at environment design done by the professionals, done by like the teams who make games like this, but also in this case, how the building system allows you to work with what you've got. And I think Enshrouded sort of takes a leaf out of Minecraft's book, in that most of the stuff that you can find out there in the world, you can acquire those blocks and build in the same style yourself. With the difference being, in Minecraft, you just walk up to and hit whatever it is with a pickaxe, and usually you're able to obtain the block. Whereas in Enshrouded, while the building system is really quite powerful, it takes a lot of work to acquire new blocks because a lot of them are locked behind either NPC side quests or exploration. Like, you can go into other locations, sometimes with higher level enemies, and if you know where to find a chest that's got a new type of building block in, that then unlocks it for crafting back at your workstation at your base. And it really gives you perspective on how flat the progression in Minecraft is, because once you've got tools, that's it. Like, you can go basically anywhere and grab anything, and there aren't like more difficult regions of the world to visit. Even stuff like ancient cities, where the warden is probably the most tough enemy you might encounter, the whole point is not necessarily to encounter the warden to acquire those blocks. In fact, it's better if you don't. And, you know, you can consider that one of the more challenging regions of the Minecraft world, but you can go there with a limited amount of gear and still acquire some of the stuff that you would get from there. Whereas in Enshrouded, I've worked really, really hard. I've probably got like maybe 20 or 30 hours in the save that I'm playing sort of off stream, and that I have just about acquired the ability to make stone bricks now. Although
Wow.
there are a couple of dungeons that I've been into where the reward for completing the dungeon more or less is the blocks that the dungeon was made out of, and so then you can start making some of those and use them in your own decorative stuff. Recently, though, interestingly, I unlocked tools that allow me to add overgrowth and decay to structures. So there's a farmer NPC who will sell you a tool that allows you to put like ivy on the wall of a house. And that's handled differently to how Minecraft blocks are, because the aesthetic of the game is different. And even though things are snapped to a grid in Enshrouded and you can build on a block by block basis, a lot of the stuff like plants and whatnot, it doesn't keep the voxel-based aesthetic for, and it allows you to kind of paint onto the walls of a house with ivy or like overgrown like wisteria or something like that. And the decay tool allows you to make stuff look like some of the ruins that you find out there around the map, where normally the detail is slightly finer than a single block of that material might typically allow. So I'm still in early days with that. I'm building in different styles, and I'm just exploring the entire map to see what you can build with. But I think the frustrating thing for that compared to Minecraft is, if I want to go and build with terracotta in Minecraft, I can just find the nearest Badlands or even dig clay up out of the river. And there's multiple paths to get to materials that you can more or less build your starter house out of whatever you want. Whereas in Enshrouded, you have to do a lot of exploration. It's gated behind a few different abilities that you unlock as you travel. And then you have a risk of, as far as you get into the wilderness, running into some enemies that are going to absolutely wipe the floor with you. So it's a very different experience, but one that I think is going to feed back into how I approach stuff in Minecraft. If nothing else, just because of how easy it is to put together a fairly realistic looking house, and the way that the materials in Enshrouded will actually join together as like connected textures. Like, it will actually form those connections a lot more readily than Minecraft will. And so that gives me some thoughts about how to use similar materials in Minecraft and how to fold everything back into reproducing that kind of style when you have the 1 meter Minecraft block as the most detailed thing that you can really put down.
That's something that I was noticing when we were playing Enshrouded together, was the automatic, not just connected textures, but connected geometry.
Yeah.
So when you put a railing or a block up against a stone wall that's wood, you'll have that little triangle piece for support that will automatically go in there.
Yes.
If that's the end of the wood piece. And then if you connect another wood piece to it, it'll go away. But you can have it look like it's installed in a way that's supported by gravity, which I thought was really cool. Great when that's the style that you're building in. There's not a lot of flexibility in that style, and that everything is going to be designed in a way that it looks like it belongs in Enshrouded. So you're I don't want to say stuck, but you're dealing with a medieval type, swords and sorcery kind of style. You're not going to get into like modern looking materials. At least probably more magical looking materials in later parts of the game that I don't know about. But for now, it's very much stone and wood and stuff. And in a way, the experience kind of reminded me of building with Satisfactory, because Satisfactory, it's modular, but it's not block by block. But you have to have a certain amount of core materials in your inventory, iron and rods and plates and those kind of things. When you're building a lot of the flooring and the walls, concrete is another one. And in my experience with you in Enshrouded, you had to have a lot of wood planks and stone in your inventory. And then from the build menu, you could just kind of like build whatever you want. You didn't have to build the stone wall before you place the stone wall. You didn't have to craft the wooden railing before you place the wooden railing. As long as you had wood in your inventory, you just go into the build menu and pick the thing that you want and go from there. And so it was a lot more interesting that way. And I don't remember it feeling like it broke the game immersion either. Like Minecraft is very much in game. Like you feel like you're crafting the thing at a crafting table, then you take the stairs over and you place them down. Whereas in Shrouded, it's like it's a big build menu, and it's like that in Satisfactory too. But because Satisfactory is a sci-fi game, the amount of menus that come up don't really seem to faze me. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Enshrouded, I thought it would. Like I thought the depth of the menu would be a little bit more immersion breaking, but it was pretty straightforward. And I think you immediately find that, well, if it was immersion breaking, then the satisfaction of building a wall in one click, is much nicer. And something that you showed me, which I didn't realize, is that after you build the wall, you can still go in and like voxel by voxel remove pieces of it. So if you wanted to like take a corner off the wall, or if you wanted to make the window a little bit bigger, or whatever it is that you wanted to do, you can do that. And I thought that was really cool. And the limited experience I have in Uncharted, I did enjoy it. I thought the traversal was really cool. I liked the animation. The lighting was nice. The concept of going into the shroud to then go and get more rare materials in a place that is like out to get you and is a lot more challenging from a PvE perspective. I thought that was really cool too. I haven't returned to it, but not that I didn't like it. I think my unfinished command center is just beckoning me until it gets to a point where I can take screenshots from multiple angles and there's not giant holes in it. I feel like that's kind of my focus, but I do want to return to Enshrouded for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like it's cool to have another building game. It's cool to have a game that's more geared towards like the PvE adventure. And something that I like about it too, which we just touched on before we wrapped up the stream, was the gear, like the swords and the upgrades, and the fact that you've got that not tech tree. What's it called?
Like a skill tree kind of thing. Yeah.
Skill tree. Thank you. Yeah. Skill tree, where you can choose, like, are you going to be more tanky? Are going to be more archery? Like, are you going to do more magic? And you then get rewarded by like, oh, well, I've added into my attack and I've added into my defense, and I've also just upgraded my sword. So quite early on in the game, you go from running around in your underwear with a stick to having some armor and having a two-handed sword that packs a wall up, and it starts to be a little bit more fun in that way.
Yeah. I think Minecraft still is going to be the thing that I keep coming back to, because in Minecraft it's so player-driven, whereas Enshrouded has a balance of like, you can sit there and build if you want to, but you can also do all of the quest line stuff, and like, yeah, it's a good balance of that kind of stuff. This time around, we're not going to have much to say in the news segment because it has been a slow news week with everything still in this sort of holiday hibernation mode. We covered Snapshot 26.1, Snapshot 1 for the most recent episode of the Spawn Chunks for episode 382, which feels like a while ago actually because we were still pre-recording at the time. But we're looking forward to more development news once the team is ready to publish it. For now, we're just going to move right on into Chunk Mail. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And as Joel mentioned at the end of the last episode, we are basically clearing out some of the old email from that inbox. There's some stuff that's just, topics we've already covered, old email that was no longer relevant because, later updates had kind of preempted what people were writing into the show about. So we'd love to get some more email. Please do keep them short and to the point if you can. It really does help us include them in the show more easily. And if you're a patron of the show, let us know in the subject line because we'd love to get some email from our patrons as well. Joel is going to read this first one for us.
This first email of 2026 comes from Farad. Farm animal home blocks. Near the end of episode 379, you discussed home blocks for animals like hay bales for horses. The issue with using certain blocks as home blocks for the farm animals in particular, which might also be used as building blocks where one might not want a home block to attract animals. An idea to solve this and introduce a feature in a non-game altering way could be to use a cauldron as a feed trough. Put seeds in it for chickens, potatoes for pigs, wheat for cows, apples for horses, and so on. Animals nearby get attracted to the cauldron when they are within a certain radius of it, which could be enlarged by putting more levels of food in a cauldron. Any cauldron without food placed in the world would just be a regular cauldron as we know it today. Farad was squished too much by a herd of cows after accidentally putting wheat in a cauldron.
It's a fun idea. I think it's a good point as well about home blocks being used in builds.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like, though, we already get away with using stuff like villager workstations in a lot of different contexts. Like, there are people who will build with fletching tables or cartography tables because they have that vertical plank texture. I know a lot of people like to use blast furnaces or smithing tables as like an interesting floor. And barrels obviously show up more or less everywhere in especially medieval builds. I suppose the difference there is that villagers don't spawn naturally outside of the villages that you'll encounter whilst you're running around the world. So you don't end up with, like, you build your thatch roof farmhouse and then all of the naturally spawned cows that are nearby start to like flock in, or herd in, I guess, towards your farmhouse. You're less likely to use villager workstations close to where you have villagers because the functionality of them is so based on what villager workstations are nearby. So I think it makes sense. I think we could probably still get away with using some blocks that are pre-existing in their current state to work with animals, but I can see where it maybe gets a little bit tricky to deal with animals pathfinding as a result of that.
Yeah, I agreed with that too. Like, it's definitely something that I mentioned in I think episode 379, which is what I've used beehives as decorations in some of my kitchens, and it's too close to some bees in backyards, and the bees use the kitchen hives as home base, and they fill them with honey. So you walk into your kitchen and the cupboards are dripping with honey, which is not part of the plan. But the idea of adding functionality to the cauldron, I really like. It's not a new block, but it's a new function for a block, and it makes sense. Like, you can put stuff in other things. It would probably work very similar to a composter, right? And I think that people would either discover it through an advancement, in the game, or just by saying, oh, well, I can do this with another similarly shaped block that is just made of wood. Can I put the same sort of things in a cauldron? And if I can, does it do something different? And I really like that idea, especially because it also opens up decorative ideas. So back when barrels came out, people wanted, or I say people, I know I've mentioned it, I feel like it was part of the Minecraft community, was like, we'd like to have a barrel full of apples. Like, I'd like to put apples in a barrel and see the apples as opposed to just the lid of the barrel. Yeah. And in this particular case, you could do that. Like, you could, if the texture was something that was readable, then you could have a big bin full of potatoes or full of seeds or full of whatever it was that you're putting in there. And that could open up some decorative options. Also, cauldrons are used, or at least they used to be used, in some cases to get comparator outputs for redstone contraptions. I think maybe the crafter might replace that now. But it would eliminate the need for clicking around your redstone build with a bucket of water and maybe misclicking and washing away a bunch of stuff if you could just put potatoes in it. It's also, it's more accessible. You can change the level, get a different comparator output of it. That kind of stuff could be kind of fun. I really liked the idea of the level of material in the cauldron increasing the radius of the effect. I thought that was cool, because maybe you don't want cows coming from far and wide. You just want the 3 cows that you have to stick close to home. So maybe it's like a short 5-block radius or something even smaller. I thought that was cool. And because a cauldron is just a single block, and it is a full block, not like a half block or anything like that, it'd be pretty easy to hide. Bury it in the ground, stick it underneath a hay bale, put it in a pile of hay bales, that kind of thing. Even if you don't want it to be visual at all, you could build it into like a chimney design and then just have that be what keeps the animals nearby and not have it be in the middle of your field. So I feel like there'd be ways to hide it, which would be really cool. It would depend on the radius. Like, if it also had a bit of a vertical radius, you could just bury it in the ground and not have it be, something that you could see at all, which I think is kind of cool. That's kind of where I think the strength of the idea is, that it's very flexible. And I like the idea of using some other blocks, especially when it just makes sense. Like, if it's an existing block and it makes sense to alter it or add some functionality to it without having to add a new block, then I think that that's a good way to go.
It's a neat way to refresh some blocks that might have fallen by the wayside in terms of functionality that doesn't get used all that much. Like, I know in Java Edition, cauldrons are way less important to brewing than they at first appear. I like the idea of there being a new trough block, if only because it would allow for it to branch out into a block that has connective properties. Like if you think about how stairs or chests work, where they can change shape and, add to each other and tile better when you place them side by side. I like the idea of having a single block that you could put down that looked similar to a cauldron, but then being able to expand the shape of it, even make like an L-shaped kind of trough if you put multiple of them side by side. And so doing that out of, let's say, copper, for example, could be a neat way of extending the size of the vessel. And I think more blocks in general like that would be kind of cool. Like aside from stairs and walls, glass panes, that kind of thing, we don't have a whole lot of stuff that works like we were talking about in Enshrouded that connects together and has a texture that expands as you place more of that material in the same spot. So it'd be really interesting to have stuff like that. The kind of thing that gets emulated by mods and resource packs with like connected glass and connected bookshelves and right. That kind of thing. So it'd be neat to see some stuff like that coming directly from Mojang in future. We're going to move on into email number 2. This one comes in from Sunnybrook1, who is a landscape artist member of our Discord, and the subject is Bedrock Bugs Bite. Hey Johnny and Joel, while I started on Minecraft Java Edition, lately I've spent more time on Bedrock Edition to play with friends. However, the last few updates to Bedrock introduced some serious FPS issues that caused myself and a lot of other players grief, which surprised me. I was one of the folks who thought that when Microsoft originally bought Minecraft and invested so heavily in Bedrock Edition and its monetization via the Minecraft Marketplace, that it meant they'd focus on improving the experience of that version of the game the most, moving forward. Since that doesn't seem to be the case, or perhaps their idea of improvements have been making deals that bring other IPs into the game via paid add-ons like Fortnite, I've wondered what this means for the long-term future of Minecraft. Do you think enough people at Microsoft recognize the value that its players place in maintaining and improving the game experience, or is it yet another company that sees their game as one big merchandise advertisement that can be bad and still do its job? Sunnybrook1 eyes the armadillo plush slippers on the official Minecraft shop with suspicion.
And they included an image of the plush armadillo slippers that we'll have in the show notes as well, because I thought they were pretty funny looking.
They are quite funny looking. I remember having some slippers that were just like giant soccer balls, like footballs, and one of them was like a slightly odd size that compared to the other one. Like they hadn't been made as like a perfectly matched pair. Like the stitching was slightly tighter in one of them, and so it always felt like I was walking around with mismatched feet. But I never considered walking around with actual creatures on my feet. I know there are like other sort of plush slippers that do a similar thing. There's some that looks like, Muppets or whatever. But this is the first time I've actually seen Minecraft go into putting mobs on your feet. That's a new one to me.
I always think like the big fluffy cartoony slippers are fun. I have really large feet, so they never fit me. They're usually at most like a men's size 12, and I take a 14. So like there's and my feet are wide too, so there's just no way. But I've never really liked the idea, for whatever reason, of the full animal design. If it looks like the head of an animal, like a bunny slipper with floppy ears, like that's cool and cute. But when it's this, when it looks like the armadillo, I just feel like I'm jamming my foot up their butt, and it feels weird. It looks very, very strange. But they're very blocky, which is also an odd thing. It's very similar to seeing like the Minecraft bee in the Minecraft movie. These armadillos, they don't really stray too far from the model in the game, and so to have a piece of clothing that is a giant, it looks like a tissue box, right?
Yeah.
It's really
they are
funny.
very, very square. To address the actual point of the email, I think it is very easy for us to shake our fists at Microsoft. It's $1 trillion company. We sort of think of it, we always discuss this in the same way that people discuss like Amazon or whatever, as this sort of nebulous entity that is generally to blame for very specific problems that you have had, like the way Minecraft runs. And I think it's worth remembering, first of all, that the game developers are not the marketing and or merchandise team. So a team that's generating ideas for Minecraft products and advertising is going to have little to no effect on whether or not the game performs well. I was looking into this actually, and even like the DLC packs, we're talking about the stuff that goes out on the Minecraft Marketplace that are pretty high-profile things, are sometimes made by a separate team, whether it's operating under the Minecraft banner or like an independent creator who Mojang has communicated with and handed off the responsibility for producing a world under a certain brand. Like if you take a look at the latest SpongeBob SquarePants Biomes world that was just the most recent collaborative thing on the news feed on Minecraft.net, This was made by a group called Starfish Studios, who also worked on the recent Disney Moana 2 world. Meanwhile, you've got the Stranger Things DLC, there's recent brand deals with Adidas and Lush, the Ben 10 and Star Wars DLCs. Those are all credited to Minecraft. But that's not necessarily saying that the Minecraft team developed those in-house, or that it took any resources away from the team that develops the game. So what I'm saying is, don't fall into the trap of assuming that the extra DLC and promotional stuff takes any time and resources away from the core Minecraft Bedrock Edition team. That being said, it's worth acknowledging that people have had a lot of performance issues with Bedrock Edition lately, and some of those have come as a result of them trying to move the technology of the game forward. I remember that a recent solution that was being suggested for some of these performance issues was to go in and disable something that was supposed to provide performance improvements. I think there was a toggle somewhere that was for maybe it was hardware acceleration or something like that. I forget exactly what the toggle was, but people were finding that disabling that meant that it put less load on whatever PC component was causing the issue, or in the case of console play, maybe it was even just putting some load on a component somewhere that wasn't really prepared to handle that extra hardware acceleration or whatever it was. I'm sorry I don't have more specific details on this, but the point is they are trying to work on the technology of the game behind the scenes, but it's not necessarily a problem that catches every single platform that Bedrock Edition is on. Java Edition is a single platform with obviously a variety of hardware, but it's all sort of dependent on Java and it's all run through the same launcher and everything. While Bedrock Edition is Windows 10, Windows 11, iOS, Android, Xbox One and Series, PS4, PS5, Switch, and Switch 2. Am I forgetting any in that? Or does that sound like the full list?
That sounded about the full list, yeah.
Yeah, and so my impression is that Bedrock Edition releases have a lot more hoops to jump through before bug fixes can be published, because so often a bug fix is going to affect one version but not another. Like what happens on Windows to improve the experience there might have absolutely no effect on the Switch version, and then publishing it as a broad patch for Bedrock Edition, which is what they would have to do because it's all under the same version number and hotfix and everything. The Nintendo store looks at that and goes, well, this has absolutely no benefit to our customers, so why are we letting you publish this new hotfix? Like, what's in it for us? And I presume that each time that has to go through, there's QA that has to happen to make sure it still works on a range of devices. The stores for those devices have to approve a patch, and some of them might even have limits on how many patches can be published or how frequently or whatever. So yeah, I do think it's a tricky line to walk, and unfortunately the rate at which this can be fixed is what's leaving a lot of Bedrock players in the lurch with these recent performance issues.
Yeah, I think to your point about Minecraft and the marketing team and the development team being separate, that you also have to remember that Minecraft is a game that most players buy once and is then updated frequently for free. And there has to be a way for that to be a sustainable model given the scale of this game, like how many people play it and how often even on this show, we ask for updates and new stuff. And that costs time and money and energy and all that kind of stuff. And I would say that, you have to have a number of ways to then fund those developments. And the Minecraft marketplace is one of, I would assume, a number of ways that Minecraft and Mojang and Microsoft are doing that. I think about it very similar to licensing with Lego. Licensing saved Lego from a not great space way back in the day, and it took the company to another level. Now, yes, some of the licensing sets for Lego are very expensive. I'm looking at you, Star Wars and Harry Potter. Others are a little bit more reasonable depending on how you look at it. But overall, I also feel that Lego sets that are just designed by Lego, whether it's the botanicals or the modulars or whatever they've been doing in the last several years, have really taken a step forward in terms of design and things. Because you can make an angled wall and do this really cool stuff in modulars because of the innovation that was needed to build a transformer or a Star Wars ship that had angled wings. So there's all these different pieces that get repurposed into cooler and cooler stuff because the licensing was able to fund it. And so I think that that's one way to positively look at the marketplace. And to your point about the lack of improving things, I just don't think that that's the case. I think that the drop schedule, the amount of times that Minecraft is updating now throughout the year, and the efforts that they're trying to line up, even though they are not, and I don't think they ever will be in sync, having Java and Bedrock Edition take steps together, they seem to follow suit quite quickly. And that schedule of improvements, the inclusion of feedback from players in the snapshot cycle, and the fact that Bedrock and Java are talking a lot more about having parity in terms of the gameplay, I think that all bodes very well for the future of the game. I'm not worried at all about Minecraft leaning into licensing and marketing as a way to focus without really updating the base game. That said, I think it's worth mentioning that Hytale is going into early access next week on the 13th, I think, of January. And when you do have big bugs like what Bedrock players were experiencing, which I don't want to diminish, like that sucks. When you have things like that, when you have changes that come to the game that either change the functionality of the game, the number of people that can access it, or if the game is changed in a way that aesthetically most players don't like, Hytale is going to get a decent amount of attention because of its history, because of its tie-ins, I think, to Minecraft. So I think the Minecraft community will probably look very closely at Hytale. But when you have situations like this, when a Bedrock update prevents players from getting in there and playing the game that they love, a game like Hytale could get a lot more attention. And so I think that that's another reason why I don't think that you will see Microsoft and Mojang slack on the development cycle and the announcements of things. Like, I would imagine that there are some updates coming up this year that will get a lot of attention from Minecraft, because just like last year, there were a number of things that we just couldn't predict. Like we didn't see the Copper Golem coming back around. I think that there could be some interesting things coming this year for Minecraft. So I wouldn't say that it's leaning in either direction. I think that it's worth noting that while Minecraft is the behemoth, like it's the big boy in the room, there's still some other players out there that are competitive. And I think that Mojang and Microsoft are aware of that. And so there's a lot of motivation to continue to innovate the game development for Minecraft.
Yeah, I think even having heard from the developers, and I wish I had sources to cite here, but I'm pretty sure folks like Xylephian have maybe taken to Twitter to say, to address like when people have left comments saying, well, what do you think about Hytale? Is it a competitor or whatever? They'll say, it's good for us to have competition in this space because it pushes us to want to do better. And I think that's a very, very positive thing. For me, the major issue is still the fact, I think, for Bedrock Edition, that users are limited to playing the current version only. So if there's a version that comes out with bugs in it, there's very little you can do about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because of platform limitations. I don't think you're allowed to sort of roll back versions on some consoles. Like, they look at like down patching as like something that they don't want to promote. So kind of difficult to make that available to the entire player base. But it's still one of the major issues, I think, that separates Bedrock and Java Edition, is if Java has a bad update, people can just not use that version until a hotfix arrives or when the next sort of dot release comes up. And perhaps it's because I've always played and therefore focused on Java Edition. I feel like there is a stronger history of communication from the Java team, especially with regards to their internal processes and ways that they make their development pipeline better. Like, a great example of this is in 1.14, the first release of Village and Pillage launched with some pretty major chunk rendering issues. And you can even go back to like my old videos on Survival Guide where that update comes out, and I acknowledge in that video, oh hey, like the chunks are going to be rendering weirdly in the background until they figure that out. But they acknowledged that, pivoted to, in 1.15, a more technical update instead of focusing on content rolling forward. They went, okay, we need to do an update that addresses some of the bugs in Java Edition. We're going to do that and add bees. And then they reintroduced release candidates by 1.16 to try and catch any issues that might otherwise have slipped through the net, because the pre-releases didn't have the same chunk rendering issue that the full release of 1.14 did. And somebody, I suspect it may have been Sliced Lime, kind of put their foot down and said, we need to have a process that makes sure we catch these things and the last version before the actual release is effectively the actual release and just a version that we can put out there to say, this is it if nothing else crucial shows up, which is pretty much always what they say in the release candidate changelogs. Whereas the MO with Bedrock Edition seems to be, we've heard your feedback and we're working on addressing these issues, but we don't hear anything about internal processes changing to prevent stuff like that from happening in future. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's not communicated to the player base. And so what we're left with is the impression that the Bedrock Edition team is just putting out fires when they happen, rather than working on fire prevention. And again, it would be great to hear from the team either way. I think transparency, especially from big developers like this, is very reassuring to the player base. It just depends whether or not they have enough time and resources to devote to somebody going on social media publicly, preparing themselves for a wave of backlash, as a lot of the Minecraft social posts I've seen have been getting in the wake of these Bedrock Edition issues, and somebody coming out and saying, we are working on this, here's how we're working on it. So I hope for that in 2026. And I also hope for people to extend a more generous eye to especially small teams who are working on big projects for big companies. Because realistically, when you get down to the ground level of people who are actually working on Minecraft, it is a fraction of like what Microsoft is as a company. So I think it's always worth keeping that stuff in mind.
Just a quick thought. We don't have to dive into this now because there's no way to know the answers off the top of head. But I wonder how the age demographic skews between Bedrock and Java. I get the feeling, because of the devices that you can play Bedrock on, that Bedrock probably skews a lot younger.
Sure.
And so if your Java audience is older, then the level of communication for Java also tracks compared to Bedrock. But at the same time, your Bedrock audience has been getting older, right? As Minecraft is now a 16-year-old game, almost 17 years. And I think that that's worth looking at in terms of like the communication styles and having both available, in terms of like very simple, very straightforward, very easy to follow, versus like, oh, there's going to be some people that are older and want some in-depth stuff. There might be, Bedrock players out there that are looking to make stuff for the marketplace, and they want to know, more detail about how things are developing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that these games are so often developed by people who have as much of a passion for the game as you do. It's easy to see them as dispassionate when they're sort of working from behind this screen that you're not allowed to look behind. But it's also like, a lot of these people are probably as frustrated as you are that these issues are coming about. It's just they are stuck doing what they can rather than doing what the player base wants to happen yesterday. So I think sympathy all round, and let's hope that for Bedrock Edition players especially, things improve as we move into 2026. Speaking of which, we would like to discuss our plans for 2026. It seemed like a good discussion topic to kick off the year, if not with New Year's resolutions, then at least outlining some of the projects that we'd like to work on in our personal Minecraft lives. And while we don't have any development news, maybe a little light speculation about what we would like to see from Minecraft this year. So Joel, why don't you kick us off?
Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I've been consumed by this command center in the sci-fi area, but the sci-fi area in general is my focus now. It's a big shift from the completion of Westhill in September last year. That was a 5-year build, roughly. And so I'm not planning on spending 5 years in the sci-fi area, but like never say never. I am streaming a lot more now compared to like weekends back when I first started Westhill, so I have a lot more hours available. But also, the command center is taking a very long time. So it's a bigger area than Westhill. I think I'd have to measure it, but I think it's close. Maybe certainly bigger than the town of Westhill. If you include the Westhill Valley, maybe not. It's maybe about the same, just a different shape. But it is taking longer. Mostly, I think, because it's a new design style. So I'm making decisions a lot slower. And it's also a very big singular build. It's much larger than I really planned it to be. But in order to get the shape that I was inspired by in Minecraft, I had to make it big enough for the blocks to make sense. So right now the battle is trying to figure out what to design on the inside, because I don't want to have every farm I need inside of this one building. The idea of the sci-fi area was to expand and just create a new building and a new idea and something cool looking for everything that I might need. So when I build a smelter, there'll be a smelter building. When I build a bamboo farm, That's probably going to be close to the smelter because that's how I'm going to fuel it. But that's going to be its own building. And I'm just kind of going back and forth between like, do I build micro farms? Do I build like, if I need bamboo for wood and I need bamboo for fuel, do I build two and just have one included in the smelter and then have another one for making chests? Like, I'm still on the fence about that. But one thing I do want is to have to travel to other buildings to go and get things that are all in the same area. So rather than going to a central storage system where I'm trying to ship all kinds of stuff to, I want to go and get like a shulker box full of rockets from the rocket facility and maybe get a shulker box full of sugarcane or like whatever it is that I need from the other places. So that's the idea. It's going to give me some opportunities to design different things, add different colors, because I don't want everything in the command center to be purple and yellow and white no matter what I'm building. Like if I'm building a smelter, maybe I wanted to make it a red building. Like maybe I want to make the sugarcane a bright green building. Like that could be really fun. So I'm trying to work with color more because I had so much gray and brown in Westill that I need to kind of expand that palette a bit to make myself feel not comfortable, but more inspired with what I'm doing in Minecraft. And the nice thing about these long-term builds is that I don't have to make all these decisions now. Just like with Westill, I had no idea that Deep Slate was coming when I started Westill. And in the same way with the command center and the Mushroom Island, there's lots of things under the surface of the Mushroom Island. There's opportunities where I don't have to light things up for mobs. And so depending on what I want to do and depending on what Minecraft releases over the next year or 3, I have space to expand with the expansions. Well, when new drops come out with maybe new blocks, like I don't know what my smelter will look like because I haven't seen the block I'm going to use yet, right? So there's that really cool opportunity of taking things slow. I only play Minecraft when I stream, so it's roughly 3 hours a day from Tuesday to Saturday. And so I'm just trying to kind of go step by step and move forward there. I am really looking forward to sorting out the other buildings and starting to feel like it's less of a command center just plopped on a Mushroom Island. Like I want to start thinking about like, is it going to be organic? Is the landscape going to be land? Or is it just going to be metal as far as the eye can see? Like, is it going to be like a Coruscant, like from Star Wars where like it's just all tech, all city all the time? I like that idea, but that's a lot of material. So like I'm also trying to figure out what that's going to look like. So there's a lot of decisions left to be made, but that's kind of what I'm looking at the first part of my 2026 for sure is going to be finishing up this command center, at least to the point where I can like take screenshots from just about any angle and not have it feel like it's got like no back or no roof or giant holes in the wall. I don't think all the wings will be finished right away. As I mentioned, like they might be reserved for other things as Minecraft develops, but for now, the focus is on the command center and the surrounding area and trying to come up with some ideas for it.
Yeah, I'm with you on really wanting to focus on one specific build project because I think the Windy City is going to be that for me on Survival Guides.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where a lot of the recent things that have inspired me wanting to make this are still current. Like we've got wind charges and the wind burst effect and things like that, like whether it's traveling by mace using the wind burst enchantment for that, or the new spear lunge effect being able to dash with that. I recently saw, I think it was an Etho video on Hermitcraft where he pointed out that if you have the levitation effect from a shulker, you can still dash using the lunge ability, which cool. I think is going to be a really interesting combination and perhaps another reason to bring shulkers over from the end, because I've never thought they felt particularly quick or useful as like an elevator opportunity, not in the same way that like bubble columns will just shoot you upwards, But I do think that if you want to, line up a dash and you have a little bit of like levitation time, there can be a gamified approach to that can still lend itself to some interesting opportunities. Or if you just want to air dash a bunch of times before you land somewhere, maybe levitation and that could play together pretty well. But yeah, outside of that, I think I really want to get into this build stone movement that I've seen moving throughout the community lately. I'm a bit late to the party here, but I do think that's going to be one of my focuses this year is I want to work on aesthetic redstone stuff. I've really enjoyed putting together stuff like my copper aging machine, and I love the aesthetic of lots of modular redstone all coming together into one large contraption. But there are so many great ways that can be incorporated into especially modern build styles where you expect there to be a little bit of life and animation, and it's not just a sort of sleepy pastoral village. There's more of a vibrant city going on. And if I'm working with kinetic stuff with wind charges and the player's motion around a city, it makes perfect sense to have other elements of the city move around as well. Mojang has been really good at adding mobs that add a bit more life to an environment with allays, copper golems, happy ghasts. I think it's neat to have more opportunities for incorporating block movement into a city in a way that doesn't feel too forced or like look weirdly glitchy from a distance, which I think has always been the case with like piston pushing stuff. If you're not up close to it, the animation of it looks very like there are gaps that are more visible in pistons pushing blocks around. And so the rendering of it is important. And I think a lot of what people are starting to nail down with Buildstone and, you know, having giant fans and windmills and stuff moving around there is that there are some blocks that render a lot better in their movement from a distance because it's a simple state change from one to the other with like trap doors. So I'm going to start looking into little bits and pieces like that because I really think that can help in forming the aesthetic of some of the stuff I plan to build at the Windy City, which I think is going to be my project for the rest of the year. Like you, I'm waiting to be informed in what I choose to build by whatever Mojang announces for the next few releases. But in the meantime, I think it's that and diving back into a few resource farms is probably what's on the horizon for me. The landscape of those has changed slightly, with witch farms being better for redstone after the changes to Bad Omen nerfed raid farms, and so there's like a few little bits and pieces that I need to revise, I suppose, that maybe changed a little bit since the last season of Survival Guide, but I'm looking forward to getting back into doing that. I haven't even got to the point in that world where I built a gold farm yet, so I'm looking forward to taking on a few more projects like that as well. Mix up the technical and building stuff, but also allow building to have a focus where I haven't really had a great tutorial in mind for some of it. I still feel like I should get back into building for building's sake because it can be a good backdrop to some of the tutorial stuff that will come later.
That's where I might return to Southport, the modern city on the Citadel, if I need a break from the sci-fi thing, or
Yeah.
I just want to make something that isn't necessarily functional, or if I have a need for a building. Because this happens to me a lot where like, oh, I'm going to need this much quartz. I was like, oh, crap. Now I need to source that. So like, do I do piglin bartering? That means another gold farm. Like how do I handle all of this? If I want this to be all in and around the Mushroom Island, not have to like travel to other places on the server to go get it. And so if I want to build for just building's sake, then there's lots of unfinished stuff in Southport. You know, there's a skyscraper that has no back on it. There's empty lots that really I think would look good if we had like a city street that had buildings on both sides of it. So stuff like that would be nice to break out of the sci-fi zone and just build for building sake. And I think also for whatever reason, I've been consuming a lot of architecture videos on YouTube, just modern stuff. And that works with sci-fi in terms of the modern shapes, but like they're also current contemporary houses. And I think that having some of that kind of thing happen just to kind of scratch that itch. You're like, just like, hey, I'm inspired by this YouTube video to make a kind of a cool modern looking house that doesn't really fit sci-fi, but like there's nothing to say that I can't bop over to the sci-fi to the city zone and do a house and then come back. I did that with Westhill where the server iron farm would stop working because of a change to the game, and so I went back and rebuilt it. But in the process of rebuilding it, realized this was one of the first things I built on the server. I have to tear it down to update it. It's a good opportunity to build something fun and different and completely outside of the Westhill medieval style and just redo the iron farm. And that was like a good month or so of me, escaping my current project and getting a good brain break. So I know the value of that. So I'm definitely thinking about other things like that on the server. I'm curious, with the Buildstone, like how much of that I'm going to incorporate into my sci-fi area. I've got some blinking lights here and there. I tried doing some stuff with copper, and this is going to bring me to a question I have for the Windy City. I tried to do and successfully had a strobing effect on copper bulbs made with some observers, but they make noise. I didn't realize that copper bulbs have like a little audible bonk when you turn them on and off. It's cool, but it's not what I wanted right next to the door of the sci-fi area. So I'm curious, with the Windy City, are you thinking about the noise that might be happening with trapdoors? Are you thinking about other things that will create noise? Because honestly, with all that kind of steampunky vibe that's happening in the Windy City, the little noise that the copper bulbs make might be something you want. Even if you can't see the light, that little kind of clickety-click, clickety-click, it would be really, really fun.
It kind of reminds me of the noise that more modern indicators make in cars when you've got like a turn signal on and
Yes.
it makes that dook, dook,
Yeah.
dook, dook kind of noise. It's
Yeah.
that with copper bulbs. And yeah,
100%.
I think in terms of trapdoor stuff, they are very noisy. I'd probably want to build those a little further away, but that's also where I imagine some of the like wind power to be generated from in the city anyway, because there are two mountains and a valley between them could very easily have like a couple of wind turbines there that are generating power as like the wind kind of comes through. And so that's where I might place some of the stuff that has more obvious noises attached to it. And I think a lot of people have been using mods like Extreme Sound Muffler, or I think that's what it's called, the one that allows you to like mute specific noises. And so maybe I will get into stuff like that, but I don't really want to mod too much stuff with survival guides. So I think a lot of the time it's going to be about position. It's going to be about maybe turning the occasional volume slider down the way I do with mob sounds when I'm at my Enderman farm, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of it is going to rely on verticality. I do want to build tall stuff in Windy City and have like means to get around being like a lot of vertical travel, a lot of vertical jumps and things. So if you end up coming closer to something that's like, you know, making noise on one of the higher sides of the buildings, it could be fun to have that noise happen as you travel past, but then it not be pervading the entire environment the rest of the time. So I'm going to be like fairly judicious with where I use it, and it's going to be about sight lines and where that motion is, whether it's in the kind of player's peripheral vision, or if it is something up close, I don't want it to be an absolute cacophony of sound effects. So I'll try my best to play it safe.
I will mention that if you do decide to go down a mod route for sound, only, and I say this because I know that you do cover accessibility sometimes on Survival Guide, and the one that I use, Sound Controller, is really simple, really straightforward. It has a search bar, so you can type in the actual name of the file, and it allows you to granularly select which files to either turn up or turn down. So something as simple as like you only want to maybe lower the death sound from zombified piglin as opposed to everything, right? And it's really handy that way. That's how I've muted my ghast, my happy ghast that flies around and just constantly coos like a cat. I've completely turned it down to the point I don't think you can hear it unless you're either sitting on it or not at all.
Yeah.
And I think there was one, glass breaking. I didn't turn it off, but I turned it farther down so it's not quite as piercing. But it's called Sound Controller. It's a very easy mod to install and use, and the granularity of it would allow you to do something specifically for the Windy City, but then not affect anything else in the game. And then you don't have to constantly remember to go back into your sliders and turn them up and turn them down. Because like for me, it was mine carts in my gold farm. We use entity cramming, so the mine carts are bouncing back and forth. So you have that constant like Minecraft roll repeating like sound going, and it was nice to be able to turn that down and not have that kind of like go like crazy, because I had to do the same thing. I had to turn down I just turned down the whole game volume when I went to the gold farm on stream. I mute the game, and then I'd have to remember to unmute it when I would leave. But that's what the chat room was for.
Yeah, for sure. As far as like what you were saying about returning to other projects as well, like you're doing with Southport, a bunch of us have agreed to return to the Misadventures SMP in the new year.
Cool.
There were a lot of side projects that took people away from that. In my case, it was just the fact that the updates were rolling out frequently enough that I had a lot of stuff to do with Survival Guide and lots of big projects going on there. It turns out like holes don't dig themselves, so like the massive sort of beacon mine area that I've got going on was sort of my focus for a while. And it felt like I had to show up for a copper update, so there I was. But I do want to get back into that. There's a new dungeon that Fwip has designed that has recently been added to the server with all of the admin tweaks that make it like really fun and functional. Cool. I started a sky base on that server and then realized shortly after committing to that it wasn't ever going to really have access to Elytra or the new Happy Ghasts, which might have been a mistake for me to commit so heavily to the Skyblock style base, but I'm rolling with it. I'm planning on adding some custom landscape in the area that I have claimed as my own, which might be a fun exercise for when I get tired of falling out of the sky. But in the meantime, it seems like a few people have reinvigorated their interest in playing around on that server. And I'm really there for interactions with other folks and being able to be part of the same world with people. That's what I'm getting out of Misadventures as an experience. So yeah, hopefully expecting to log back on, make a few more videos, do a few more streams, that kind of thing, and have a little holiday home from when the grind in Survival Guide gets a little bit too much for just me.
I don't have any other server projects. I think the Citadel kind of consumes most of my free Minecraft time. I will probably pop into the snapshot world that I started because it's nice now that that's established that I don't have to start from scratch. So like I have like a home base. I think I'm at a copper level or iron level in terms of armor and tools. I might even have a diamond pickaxe. So I would be able to use a survival world to experience new snapshot stuff as it happens.
I think it's a good notion to have with new updates in general, is like get in there and get your hands dirty with it. And especially if it's like a consistent world that you feel a bit more attached to, I genuinely think, and I'm going to continue like sitting on this high horse for a while, experiencing some of these features in survival is so much more rewarding than doing it in creative and just kind of popping in and going, oh, here's a few blocks, let me try and build with these. Like the mission to obtain those blocks is really going to inform how available they are to you. So like I wouldn't necessarily have planned a whole bunch for building with resin blocks as far as the Garden Awakens update if I hadn't realized that, oh, you can actually farm some of these without building like a giant, you know, floating farm in the sky like I ended up doing. But you can still go in, bop a few creaking, get hold of a decent amount of resin, get an idea for how that feels, what the experience of it is, and then you can make plans around, like, you know, using large amounts of that material. Likewise, you know, if they decided to add something that was gated behind a boss fight, you're not going to want to build with a ton of it. I think a lot of people were really excited about reinforced deep slate when that was introduced as a block, and then it turned out that you couldn't even acquire it or move it. So there's still like a lot of little odds and ends that really benefit from some playing around with that stuff in survival. And I think my hope for Minecraft this year really is more blocks. Not that I'm bored at all of Minecraft's existing block palette, but it's always really exciting when new stuff like that comes around. And there are still occasional gaps in the block palette as far as what builders would like to build with, as far as like color, harmony, and things that needs to be like available to the player if we want to build something that sort of meets our vision of all of this stuff. Speaking of vision, Vibrant Visuals for Java Edition is another thing that I'm hoping comes along this year. Obviously, if you want to play around with Vibrant Visuals, it is still there for Bedrock Edition, and we know it's still in development for Java Edition. We don't have an exact timeline, very much in its done when it's done project, but I would still love to see it this year. Like, both for the fun of playing around with it in the Survival Guide world and other sort of Java Edition worlds, but also for the fact that it's another parity thing between Java Edition and Bedrock Edition right now, and seeing those kind of reach side by side again would be a little bit more rewarding feeling to me. It'd feel like I was participating in the same experience as other people out there in the community, and being able to cover it in Survival Guide feels like, you know, kind of worthwhile. Of course, that's all coming behind all of the, you know, changes they're making to rendering and what I now understand are software threads rather than hardware threads. And so thank you to everybody who was able to clarify that for us in comments and emails and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the technical side of Java Edition adapts for Vibrant Visuals, and I'm hoping that we see more from it, at least a test version sometime in 2026.
As someone that has a brand new video card in their streaming machine, I definitely am looking forward to testing out Vibrant Visuals for me as well, because I think that, and I hope that from a performance standpoint might be even easier on my machine than shaders are. I mean, I'm still getting close to 80 frames a second live on stream, and more than that when I'm not streaming. But that's just the nature of Minecraft. I think you really have to have a beast of a machine to hit like 120 frames while you're streaming at 1080p these days. But Java and Vibrant Visuals are definitely up there. And we do have a couple of other emails about Vibrant Visuals in response to having it for 6 months and giving some feedback and then looking forward to it and stuff like that. So we'll try to include those next week in the show. I think that you'll see hopefully a balance with Vibrant Visuals. If it does run smoothly and does offer and maybe even correct some of the feedback that you see from the community, then I think that it should be a pretty smooth transition. I think that some Java players would be very interested in it, especially if it's something that doesn't require a lot of power. I think that if you're not someone that can run shaders, but you can run vibrant visuals, I think that'll be a win across the board. I'm also looking forward to new blocks, but I kind of lumped that idea in with the idea of more robust balanced drops in 2026. We've had some drops, and this is probably a bit of a carryover from my lack of interest in Mounts of Mayhem. Not to squash anybody's excitement for it, but to say that I wasn't excited for it, and say that I'm hoping that rather than some updates being like Mounts of Mayhem and then other updates being a little bit more technical and other updates being a little bit more build focused, I kind of hope that they can iterate along the way. I think with the frequency of updates, I don't think there would be a problem with updating something in the first drop of the year, and then if it wasn't quite where it needed to be, adding to that on the second update of the year. Like you can still add the new thing, like add the new mob or the new, whatever, that's happening in the second update. But if there was something that wasn't quite there in the first, fix it in the second, or add to it in the second, or tie it in somehow together with other things. And I do like the idea, as I mentioned with our email about the Cauldron, with some of the new updates, if they can add more life to existing blocks, whether that's like, as you mentioned, with like harmony with new textures, working with old textures, or even if it's new mechanics, like if it's something, oh, here's a new thing that you're going to need to build this new block. And by the way, it's dropping in this biome, or it's going to be something that's available by this kind of farm or whatever. And that then means like, oh, I have to come up with a brand new way to harvest this resource. And so it adds this like level of knock-on gameplay that is not necessarily already in the game, because it's now a different use for a certain resource. And I think that could be kind of a fun way to roll forward. So I'm hoping that the drops in 2026 are a little bit more also well-rounded is a good way to say it, I guess, which I know is challenging because they have to be small compared to the larger updates, right?
They also have to be square, which is difficult to call a Minecraft update well-rounded.
Yeah, see what you did there.
Yes, but no, I agree. I think it's odd to have had a gameplay drop like Mounts of Mayhem that did not have a block in it. And I think the same may be true of Chase the Skies, because it really did focus on the Happy Ghast, but even that starts out its life as a block. It's the Dried Ghast, and that's technically a block. I know it's not really a building block in that sense, but people do some wacky stuff with Minecraft blocks in general. I do think more stuff like that, and having a focus on making sure each update can work for each gameplay style is tricky, because you've also just got to generate ideas like that in the background constantly, and sometimes they really don't feel like they fit, especially if you've got to fit an update into the last 6 weeks of the year, which is more or less what happened with Mounts of Mayhem, barring any development time we may not have seen behind the scenes. But I do think there is room for that, and it would be something that the player base would really embrace. Like, even if you're not into this mob or that item being added, this weapon being added, at least you've got like a couple more building blocks to tide you over until whatever the next update is that rolls around. Personally, I'm hoping for stuff that fits into Minecraft's endgame, and I think that's the area that still has the most potential for expansion. And I'm not just talking about the end dimension, although that would be nice. And I think that would also benefit from what you were talking about with the modular approach to things. We've mentioned that in the past with the gameplay drop system, still being able to build an end update over the course of a year rather than it being something that drops all at once would be something I think the player base would get on board with. But I think this is really mostly for selfish reasons, wanting something for endgame, because whenever the early game gets updates, whenever they add stuff like copper armor and tools, or like a weapon like the spear, it feels like it makes the early episodes of Survival Guide less and less accurate for me. And I have had occasionally people popping into my comments saying, when are you going to start a season 4? Like, it feels like there's some stuff that's outdated about those old episodes, and you've said that's why you'd want to reset. So, like, when are you going to reset? I don't want to reset this world yet. I'm having too much fun. The seed is really nice. The world is great, and I'm happy for people to reach into like the episode 100 plus range and still find like early game concepts being introduced. But I would love there to be more of a focus on what to do after you've fought the Ender Dragon and had shulker boxes and that kind of thing. I feel like we've had new tiers of armor and weapons with netherite being introduced, but very few combat challenges that really test those unless it's a swarm of enemies, which is really what the situation is with trial chambers. It's like, spawners generating multiple mobs for you to take care of and being attacked from all angles. It's not always fun to fight. I think a lot of players would enjoy a larger encounter, something like the Warden, but something that felt a little bit less one-sided than an encounter with the Warden typically does. And maybe even, to push things a little bit further here, an emphasis on the tool progression being more important. There being more resources that rely on diamond tools in order for you to acquire them. If we're looking at endgame here, like, there's really just a couple of blocks that require a diamond pickaxe or better in order to get hold of them, and it's obsidian, crying obsidian, ancient debris. There aren't really that many others. And so I wonder if there is room in the game for a wood type that you need a diamond axe to mine. Maybe it's like hardwood or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
If you have a terrain block that can only be obtained using a diamond shovel. I expect they're probably leaving netherite out of that equation just because of how difficult it is to acquire netherite for some players, and they want to at least leave the option open for players to just stick with diamond. But I feel like the last time we got anything that really required diamond tools was the Nether update, which is now several versions and a lot of drops ago. And so I think it's going to be potentially a realm in which they can expand, especially if that involves new dimensional stuff. If it involves, like, other realms that Minecraft has yet to explore. I think populating those with things that require you to be a little better equipped when you go into them could be a good direction for Minecraft to go.
Are you thinking hardness level and scarcity, or are you thinking like this could be as easy to acquire as something like terracotta, but just happens to require a diamond pickaxe to get?
I think either is pretty valid. I think it would be neat to have something that's like maybe, let's say for the sake of argument, a new stone type that you can only really acquire reasonably with a diamond pickaxe. Like, it's not necessarily about mining speed. Like, I don't want to be mining stuff the way we mine obsidian, where you kind of have to... That's my
thought, yeah.
You just, like, zone out and acquire it. But if it's like an individual, even like a functional block or something that's used in a crafting recipe that's very scarce, but you only need one or two of them, like beacons, like I can absolutely cope with those being something that, yeah, you need a diamond pickaxe, you need an efficient pickaxe to acquire it within a reasonable time frame, but then it leads to something more valuable to players long term. Or it just being like, let's say like a particular type of terrain block that really needs a diamond shovel. You'd still want to acquire a lot of it if you plan to make more terrain out of it, but like right now you can mine anything that a shovel can mine, I think, with a wooden shovel. Like, you don't ever need a greater shovel than that. It's just helpful for the sake of speed of acquiring the resources. And so I kind of wonder, is there room in the game for some of those things to be taken to their logical extremes? And this is also slightly informed by the other games I've been playing, with Enshrouded being like, a lot of these blocks are gated behind quest progression and stuff like that. Should more blocks in Minecraft that are added in future be made valuable by gating them behind tool progression? And that's sort of the place my brain is at with this. But again, that'd be something that'd be great to hear from people via email. So, like, if you've got some thoughts about that, of course, feel free to write into the show and let me know.
That's something we discussed on my stream over the holidays, was the value of blocks. And really, at the moment, what it comes down to is what's the time sink in getting it if you need a lot of it. And a lot could be subjective. Like, I mean, if a roof of a large house that you're building is a lot, well, then that's a lot for you. But for me, it's like football fields worth of blocks. So things like quartz, lapis, I'm thinking about diamond blocks, I guess would also be valuable, not so much because of their value in the game in terms of like they're one of the more valuable tools. It's also like it's also hard to get a lot of that material if you wanted to use it. I feel like that's the big thing for me, is the time sink, right? And like, is it renewable, or does it require like you have to be at the keyboard crafting? Like concrete, another really good one. It's funny because you don't think about it as a valuable block, but when you build with a lot of it, as I did over the holidays, you realize, man, I'm kind of sick and tired of turning concrete powder into concrete like every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so or like also think like, well, I'm getting low on gravel and sand. Like, I mean, I think I've got lots of sand, but gravel is something I need to go get. It doesn't take very long because again, end game. So beacon, speed potion and a good diamond shovel, and 10 minutes you can fill a shulker box full of gravel if you know where you can find some. And it is renewable with like a piglin bartering, but I don't have that set up yet. So like there are some inherent values added to blocks that you don't really think of as being like hard to get or valuable blocks. And I like the idea of, like you said, gating something behind a diamond or I guess probably not a netherite pickaxe, but like a diamond pickaxe would be cool, especially like the shovel idea. There really isn't anything in the game that you need a diamond shovel for, as far as I know. The diamond advantage is just the durability. So it would be cool if, like, I mean, say in some sort of end drop, there's like a radioactive material or something that glows or something that just looks like you just wouldn't be able to do much with a wooden shovel. Like it either looks too heavy or it looks corrosive, thinking about like, it wouldn't make a lot of sense if you were able to pick up lava with a shovel, with a wooden shovel, or a magma block. If you could dig that with a shovel, I think it just ends up being destroyed. I'm not sure whether you can actually do that, but like it wouldn't make a lot of sense. And so having some material that dictates or would make sense that you'd need something more robust to pick it up would be cool.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like I'm also curious because of in recent years they have done away with some of the concepts that feel a little bit outmoded in Minecraft, thinking about the stuff we've normally talked about, like light levels changing in the Caves and Cliffs update to 0 light level spawning mobs, things like that. I'm kind of curious. I mean, automated crafting as well being one of the other things that was sort of an untouchable concept for a while, and the crafter introduced in Trails and Tales. I do wonder if this year might be the year we see the end of things like level limits on repairing equipment or combining equipment going away.
Right.
If we maybe see an overhaul of enchanting at some point, or like we've discussed in previous episodes, like enchantment maybe being split off into something that's slightly easier divided categories in terms of like the player experience for getting the right enchanted book out of an enchanting table. There's a few things like that I'm curious if they will touch on this year as Minecraft rolls forward. But yeah, overall, I'm just excited to see what they've got in the pipeline.
Yeah.
For now, though, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for enjoying the first episode of the new year along with us. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to enter whatever year this is of our, I think it's like 8 years, more or less, that we've been going as a listener-supported podcast. All of the support for the podcast comes exclusively from our listeners. We don't do ads on the show, basically, at all. So if you are enjoying the show, please consider putting some value back in. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, hear the show before it goes out to any other platform. We also have monthly hangouts where you can share what you've been up to in Minecraft that month, and a bumper edition of that is coming up at the end of January, when we'll be talking about December and January all in one go. So I'm sure our community will have lots to share. There are even new additions to the community. We're up one patron from the count at the end of the previous episode, although people have been coming and going, and it's lovely to see some new faces in the Discord. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons. That's Kiner Beald, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. And a shout out to new annual members, Jody Illyria and KMB600. Thank you all for your support.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on your favorite social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. There's a video version on YouTube. The render distance is also available on the Patreon page, and that's where you get the RSS feed for patrons. And there's a video version of the render distance available for patrons as well. Email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And if you're looking for just the regular RSS feed, that's on thespawnchunks.com with the show notes.
My name is Johnny, but on I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season, and look out for content from Misadventures returning as well. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series and play other games from time to time. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards episode 500 of the Citadel Cafe, which was published on Christmas Eve. It is 2.5 hours of some of my best friends online all getting together and talking about their favorite things from 2025 as far as sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. That could be tabletop games, that could be TV, that could be movies, that could be video games. It was a good mix of everything. I'm really proud of that episode and of that podcast going for now over 14 years. If you want to check out more of what I do related to this show, I stream on Twitch Tuesday through Friday at 9 a.m. and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Right now focusing on the giant command center in the Sci-Fi Zone. So if you're looking for a big build to watch come together, then I got you covered.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but we'll start with 2026.